And a touchdown for the Hamilton Tiger Cats.
Hey all, Rick here from Ticats Talk Network, aka the Hamilton Sports Central section of things. We are going to be looking at the CFL Fantasy for week number 8. We are going to do the starts versus sits, 4 players must play and who must avoid, our predictions of what the writers think, 6 fantasy sleepers, and the top plays at every position. So we're going to do with that's starts versus sits first. Then we'll do top plays. We'll do the 6 sleepers, and then we'll do predictions. So the 4 must plays are going with Montreal at Calgary. They say start Sean Thomas Erlington. Sean Thomas Erlington has, as a reliable fantasy asset, has scored at least 11.6 fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. He's also found the end zone 3 times in that span, including majors in his last 2 contests. Sean Thomas Erlington comes into week 8 as the league's 4th leading rusher with 291 yards, while adding 6 receptions on 10 targets. The Stampeders have allowed a league low 7 offensive majors and 7th in 383.7 yards allowed per game. With Davis Alexander sidelined on the 6th game, the Alouettes will turn to more towards Sean Thomas Erlington, who will face Calgary run defense that yields a CFL high 5.5 yards per carry. The stage is set for Sean Thomas Erlington to continue his revival and is salary friendly enough to fit into your lineup. Don't be surprised if Sean Thomas Erlington continues his touchdown streak this week, especially if Montreal can give him 15 to 8 touches from scrimmage. We're going to put on our sheet. Oops. 7.8. So then they're saying sit Tyler Snead. Cold Speaker comes off at 27.9 fantasy points in week 7, while Austin Mack returned to the lineup. The duo will get a lead share of the targets from McLeod Bethel Thompson, as Montreal is likely to be without the star Tyson Philpott for a second straight game. Tyler Snead had a 3rd straight games of double-digit fantasies from 2 to 4, but has seen his production tail off with outings of 7 fantasy points and 6.7 in the last 2 games. Calgary's pass defense has allowed just 7 passing majors and ranks 2nd in opponents' passing effectively at 84.3. Snead has averaged 14 yards per catch and has eclipsed 6 targets just once this season. In what could be a low-scoring affair, Snead feels like the odd man out amongst Alouette receivers this week, although better days lie ahead. So in the next game, this is the Friday game, Edmonton at Saskatchewan. They're saying start Samuel Emilus. It says here the Riders welcome their star receiver in week 7, with Emilus catching 2 of his 3 targets for 78 yards. Having Emilus back feels perfect timed with a matchup against the league's worst pass defense in the Elks, who have allowed 330 yards per game. Emilus has scored 27.3 yard fantasy points in week 1, with him using 7 as a rest off. He and Trevor Harris will make up for lost time at the expense of an Edmonton defense that has given up a league-high 13 meters when he's on the field. Emilus is cleared the number 1 wide receiver for the Riders and won't take long on Friday for him to establish himself in that role. Count on MLS to be the top fantasy producers week 8. So find the space to find him in your lineups. I can't make promises, and I can do them in. They're saying sit Trey Ford. Again, Trey Ford had an off week in week 6. It says here Elks are last and with 218.2 yards per game. With the league low 6 touchdown passes, Ford struggles in week 6. May have opened the door for Cody Fajardo to replace him in the lineup, yet neither feels like a strong fantasy play. Although Saskatchewan is 8th in passing yards allowed with 329.2 per game, if Ford does start, he will need more of a presence as a runner for him to be a valuable fantasy option. Edmonton's uncertain receiving corps also works against recommendation to start. So then we have Winnipeg at Toronto. Brady Oliveira. Dig up with that. Brady has totaled 220 yards from scrimmage the past 2 games, while averaging a run of at least 10 yards once every 6 carries. The reigning MOP and the most extending Canadian has scored 33 fantasy points in those games. Feels on the verge of a huge breakout. Is Zach Claris likely returning to action after an injury that sidelined him in Week 7, lost to Calgary? The offense will have the balance necessary to attack Toronto's defense that's given up the league's worst 18 offensive majors. One thing Oliveira has yet to do this season is find the end zone, a fact that should be changed on Saturday. He's averaged 19.5 touches per game in the last 2 weeks, and that high volume of work will translate into majors as the Blue Bombers will seek to snap their 2-game losing skid. And they're saying to sit Nick Arbuckle. Passing yards is no problem for Nick Arbuckle, who enters Week 8 third in the league with 1,691 yards. He also thrown a pair of majors in 3 of his last 4 games while completing 71.4% of his passes. Miscues have tampered Arbuckle's fantasy production. He's thrown a league-high 8 interceptions and has been sacked a NFL high 16 times, offsetting his positives. Winnipeg has allowed a league 59.9% completion rate, while also second to BC with 9 interceptions. Getting the ball downfield will be a challenge for Arbuckle, and it's a challenge fantasy users should not involve themselves. Last but not least, Hamilton 4-2 at BC 3-4 Sunday, which we will be live streaming as a watch along this Sunday. They're saying to start Keandre Smith. Breaking news. Kenny Lawler 14.8 is good at football, and Tim White 11,500 isn't too shabby at all either. The two have combined for 65 catches and 992 yards and 10 majors, while stoking the Flames for bigger aspirations in Hamilton, who bids for a 5th straight win. Given the opportunity, Keandre Smith can help fantasy users, having scored 11.8 fantasy points in Week 5 and 11.1 fantasy points in Week 7. Getting amp targets has been daunting for Smith, with just 1 game with over 6 targets. That could change in what could be an air show on Sunday between Bo, Levi Mitchell, and Nathan Rourke, who have combined for 22 passing touchdowns and 22 completions of 30-plus yards. So if Smith can find himself in more of just a complimentary role, there's enough upside to consider investing in him. who would at least be generate or who would at least be able to generate double-digit fantasy production, if not more. To sit, they're saying both Ticats and Lions are amongst the top 3 pass defenses in the league. Well, don't let the fact that influence you this week. With Mitchell and Rourke both performing at MOP levels, there's a reason for the over-under on this high game is high. Scoring will not be a problem for either team. This will not be a low-scoring affair. Rather than this will be where stacking players will be tempting. There are better defenses available this week, but neither will be in Vancouver in Sunday evening. With that being said, so now we have possible 2 running backs and a wide receiver. We still need a quarterback, a wide receiver, a flex, and a defense. So let's go see what the top players are. So we have Levi Mitchell, 15,000 for the salary, projected 19.7 projected points. BC leads league in pass defense at 212.3, but has allowed 15 of better than 30 yards. Rest assured, Levi Mitchell will add to that total on Sunday. Trevor Harris, 18.3. He's a shammed 820 passing yards and 4 majors in the last 2 games. With Emulus back in the lineup, it makes it feel like the midst of a Trevor Harris run that could carry many lineups. Nathan Rourke, over the past 3 games, Nathan Rourke has averaged 344.6 passing yards per game, while accounting for 7 touchdowns. He's worth every penny and have in your lineup. But I'm being frank. I trust Ticats receiver core over the BC, especially with our secondary, as BC's secondary hasn't been. Vernon Adams, interceptions are why VA hasn't scored more than 46.6 fantasy points in the last 2 games. If he can avoid mistakes, there's a 30 fantasy point game future. Zach Claris. Like Adams, Zach Claris' production has been hamstrung by turnovers, having thrown 2 interceptions in games facing Toronto's defense, or Toronto's pass defense that has allowed 15 plays of 30 plus more yards. Might be a tonic to get Claris back on track. Running back. James Butler didn't have a massive workload he managed in week 6, but comes into the showdown against his former Ticats mates, having recorded of at least 13 touches from scrimmage in each of his last 4 games. He remains a focal point of the Lions' offense. Rick Mills, number 2, 14.5 fantasy points. He's carried the ball at least 13 times in each game. Dedrick Mills should be more of a factor in the passing game after recording just 1 reception in his last 2 of his 3. AJ Ouellette. Since opening the season with a 2.1 fantasy points, AJ Ouellette has scored at least 12.7 in his last 5 games. One would not argue by having AJ in the atop of the Week 8 rankings, consider he faces Edmonton's defense that allows 443.6 yards per game. So let's see. Brady Oliveira. Quietly, Brady Oliveira has averaged 16.5 in the last 2 games and appears set for a breakout. He's positioned for his first 20 fantasy point effort this season against the Toronto Argonauts. Justin Rankin. One thing is certain, Justin Rankin will improve on his 0.4 fantasy points from week 6. He recorded the most touches as an Elks player, and the offense will continue to follow him. Now we get into receivers. So we have Kenny Lawler. You know you're a fantasy beast when you're scoring 15.6 points per game. Feels like a letdown. Kenny Lawler has scored in 4 straight games and has already reeled in 11 receptions for at least 20 yards and depth. Projected at 24 points. Keon Hatcher Sr. continues to make things happen after the catch, leading the league with 202 yards after catch, while recording at least 10.8 fantasy points in 5 of his last 6 games. Monty Coxie, Toronto 11-5, projected 14.7. Scored majors in consecutive games and has scored at least 10.2 points in all but one game this season. Coxie's 59.4 catch rate has room to improve, giving him incredible upside. Damian Alford, 10,000, 14 points. 4 of his last 8 receptions have resulted in touchdowns. Damian Alford has an insane 25 yard per catch and averages 20.1 depth yards per route. 5. Stanley Berryhill. Each end zone visit in 3 straight games have helped Stanley Berryhill average 19.4 fantasy points in that same. Justin McInnis. Justin McInnis is in a slump and has, having scored 3.6 fantasy points or fewer in his last 3 or 4 games. The Lions will make a concerted effort to involve him. Keyshawn Johnson. Keyshawn Johnson has caught at least 4 passes in each game this season and will remain a top option despite the return of Sam Emilis. Nick Dembski. Nick Dembski over the past 3 games has averaged 24.2 and 112.6 yards to go along with 3. Number 9, Tim White. Targets are not a problem for Tim White, who has had accumulated 21 in his last 2 games. He will continue to benefit from the defense's throwing everything slow down Waller. Number 10, Rick Wheatfall, 9.5. Toronto struggles against the deep ball, make Wheatfall a strong option at 8 after finishing with 6 yards or fewer. Kevin Mittal. Kevin Mittal has been targeted at least 8 times in 3 of his last 4 games and has scored at least 10.1 fantasy points in 4 consecutive games. Number 12, Cole Speaker, 9.5, 13 points. In 2 games in which he has had targeted of at least 11 times, Cole Speakers scored a total of 45 points fantasy. Then we go to the defenses. Calgary, 10,000, average or expected 12.6 points. Calgary Stampeders have tallied of at least 11 fantasy points in 4 of their last 5 games, including a season best 18 last week over Blue Bombers. Number 2, Saskatchewan, 9.5. Last week marked the 3 straight games that the Rough Riders have recorded both an interception and a fumble recovery. Winnipeg's -3 turnover margin, a 4th consecutive strong possibility. Montreal, 9.7, 7.6. Though not as a high scoring machine, they were in the first 2 games. Alouettes liable. And number 4, Winnipeg. Despite consecutive games in numbers, the Bombers should rebound against the Toronto team -4 turnover margin. So before we get into our lineup, let's take a look at our sleepers. So for quarterback, they have McLeod Bethel Thompson, 1,600. Running back, they have um, Johnny Augustine. So it's still unsure if Bell's going to play this week. We'll keep an eye on it. Receivers, Austin Mack, spelled to my blood. Joe Robustelli. Returned to lineup in week 7, knocking Joe down the pecking order of Trevor Harris. 1 week after racking up 30.1 fantasy points, he had 1 reception, 29 yards. Don't want that. On Julian Grant. Much. Dejon Brissett. Oaksy was the established top receiving pairing for Toronto. That's second in CFL with a 71.4 percentage. Showed his value in week 3 with a season best 8 points yet. Has been more steady and spectacular, scoring 8.4 fantasy points and 8.8 last 2. 9 points. Let's pull this up. Oops. On keyboard. Okay, so let's see. Sarah. Believe it. Question. Take or And Dembski. So, going back. August. Dembski. Dembski's a no. I go with Keandre Smith. Gives me two. That's just that expensive. 5 point. That leaves me wide receiver. Because I took out Johnny August. Let's go. 0.8. Here's the big receiver. Be there. Oh no, it's 1, 2, 4. 4 players just. Oh, if I'm out. Yes, it did. I put Dante McMahon. Go Levi Mitchell. And your fantasy. Way different than what I thought. Based on the Embo. Hmm. Then at least I have someone every game. And this is gonna suck. I'm gonna save that and save that for my lineup. But that is it for this week's fantasy. Sunday night after the game, I'm gonna do my review, and then I will do my CFL fantasy review. But I do appreciate everyone for stopping by, checking out today's episode. If you like what you see and want to see more of this, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell so that you'll be notified once more content does come out. This is Rick from Hamilton Sports Central, and have yourself a great rest of your day.